I'm Chris, this is Offbeat Builds, and today I'm going to be showing you how I kitbash these 4 Chaos Space Marine characters to hopefully give you some ideas for your Warhammer 40,000 builds. Let's start things off with a Heretic Sorcerer. And for maximum heresy, I'm basing the build on a Black Templar Sword Brethren body. These are some of the most versatile power armoured bodies going. That tabard can read as a cloak in the right context, but all of the limbs are uncovered. Scandalous, I know, but it does give you more kitbashing options. Once the legs and torso were rendered together with Tamiya's finest plastic cement, the process of detemplaring could take place. My preferred method is to scrape away the bulk of the material with a hobby knife and then tidy up the remaining areas with a fiberglass pencil, which leaves a finish as smooth as a baby's plastic toy soldiers. Since Barry, he's called Barry by the way, is a sorcerer, I made use of the flaming hand from the Kill Team Legionnaires upgrade sprue, figuring that magic fire would sell the whole Space Wizard vibe more than a bolt pistol. Try as I might, I couldn't find a left-handed power axe in my bits collection, so I liberated the hand from a chainsword-wielding Chaos Marine and proceeded to hack up a right-handed axe that I'm pretty sure comes from that same Kill Team add-on sprue. Drilling through a hand on camera was tricky, but necessary in order to reassemble the axe around a paperclip pin, which provides strength to a series of joints which would otherwise be bonded by the combined might of hopes and dreams. Did that just move? Anyway, the power pack came from a Dark Apostle with a couple of the braziers removed, which I thought improved the silhouette of the model, and made it slightly less recognisable. Speaking of which, the head is, I'm pretty sure, from one of the Age of Sigmar Slave to Darkness boxes. Back in the before times, the process of removing the Templar heraldry left a chain going to nowhere. So, obviously I thought, whack a great big medallion on there. This one came from the Age of Sigmar Chosen kit. And now onto the fancy bit. I wanted Barry to be surrounded by a swirl of psychic energy, so I twisted together some aluminium armature wire for strength, bent it around a bit of pipe, and secured it into the base of the model with an over-generous helping of superglue. While my wife wasn't looking, I stole some of her acrylic nail resin and started building up layers around the armature, stopping to cure each new drip with a UV torch. Now, this is very much one of those things where you should definitely be wearing protective gloves, so you'll have to imagine that I'm a smarter man. There wasn't much of a plan for exactly how I'd apply the resin, so I just sort of kept going until I had something that looked pretty much exactly like this. Now, you might be thinking, that axe you've used there, that's a bit sensible. Well then, may I present? I thought I'd break with tradition for my Master of Executions, or MO, see what I did there, and start with a Chaos Space Marine model. As is usually the case with this kind of thing, you have to build him up, only to cut him down. Below the belt as it happens. The remains of his belt buckle had to go, and this was carved away with a fresh blade in the scalpel and cleaned up with our old friend the fiberglass pencil. The nice thing about cuts around the belt line of a model is that you don't have to make it perfect, as you can usually hide any indiscretions behind a pouch or some other war gear. Anyway, I wanted Mo to have some old world charm, and by charm I mean terror. So I selected the torso from an Age of Sigmar Chaos Warrior with its snuggly fur cloak, and repeated the old Sora Chaos Devotee in half trick. After the cut with the razor saw, I used the hobby knife to remove some material around the belt buckle before joining both halves of the torso together. Since this isn't really what the Dark Lord Workshop intended for the model, I needed to level off the base of the torso with a shim made from styrene sheet. This was bonded in place, trimmed to shape, and the edges filled with sprue goo. Remember what I said before about hiding stuff with war gear? Well, you can see what I'm getting at here, I suppose. I dipped back into the Age of Sigmar supplies again, since the Slaves to Darkness range has the best axes money can buy. The chosen axes are two-handed, which is an inconvenience, so I did away with the right hand and reattached the end of the handle. I didn't bother with a pin here since the axe would have 2 points of contact with the model, and life is short. I did straighten it up though. Fitting Chaos Space Marine arms into the AOS body is simple, and by simple I mean it involves hacking away a lot of the shoulder joint, but it's hidden under all that fur, so it's all good. As you can see, the chosen hand scales pretty much perfectly with a power armoured arm, which is handy. Sorry. Anyway, I popped in this definitely not at all T800 looking legionary head and gave him a bolt pistol wielding arm from the same source before moving on to the power pack. It seems I definitely have a fetish for adding accoutrements or doodads to the top of my character models. This spiky banner pole topper came from the Slaves to Darkness chariot kit, and it sits atop a bit of styrene rod. This assembly was pinned in place because I am going to drop this model. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and likely butter side down. With the power pack nestled into the fur, I turned my attention to that belt. Another one of those AOS chosen medallion things made a respectable belt buckle, while the rest of the gap was disguised by a friendly little fragmentation grenade. To top things off, I decided I didn't like the join between the banner pole and power pack, so I disguised it with a couple of wraps of thin wire. After a few hours in a poorly ventilated room, I had the bright idea that Mo, being quite the skull-taker, needed a little familiar to manage his trophy haul. Cutting away the sword from the Watcher in the Dark model was fairly nerve-wracking, but I was pretty happy with the result. This left room for the trophy rack, which also came from the Slaves to Darkness chariot kit, and the hilt from an axe to create quite the calcium-rich kebab. Now, obviously, this meant that I had to make use of a base that's entirely inappropriate for this type of model in-game, but you'd be surprised how little that sort of thing bothers me. It's all make-believe, do what you like. And personally, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel if you think these builds are interesting, inspirational, or insipid. Yeah, probably not that one. Speaking of doing whatever you like, here's a Dark Apostle wearing a mishmash of tactical dreadnought armour. Those Age of Darkness Cataphractii Terminators aren't going to use themselves, and I think they make rather good Heretic Astartes legs. But I much prefer the regular Terminator torso, so it's out with the old, in with the Leviathan. This is another one of those build them up and cut them down situations, this time with a blow above the belt. That Aquila had to go, once again lovingly hacked away with a scalpel and buffed to nowhere near perfection with a fiberglass pencil. And while I was getting rid of bits that felt too imperial, I gave the searchlight stroke sensor module stroke Bluetooth dongle thing the old snip snip. Back to the Cataphractii legs, and predictably they too had a date with a razor saw before their eventual marriage to the torso. Since I had one in the bits box, I made use of their big scroll litany dealies from the Dark Apostle kit, but I think these ones from the company's champion box would be just as good. Now, for the burning book arm, I needed to bodge together a pose from 2 Cataphractii arms and the Dark Apostle hand, which, with a little careful cutting, is easier than it sounds. I used the same approach on the other arm, mating the Dark Apostle's Accursed Crozius with a run-of-the-mill Cataphractii arm. Said Cataphractii arms meant ridiculous Cataphractii shoulder pads with their mildly annoying 2-part nature. Now, I'm not entirely sure why I went with this head from the Age of Sigmar Chaos Lord model, but I did. That's a choice I made, and we're all living with the consequences. Unlike the poor souls on those Chaos Terminator trophy racks, which I augmented with a couple of Croziers from the power pack of that Dark Apostle model. Other flaming bins are available. I like a good cultist, and there's no better place to start than with a Necromunda House Cawdor ganger. Actually, pretty much any of the Necromunda gangs could have been a starting point here, but importantly, I'm cheap and already had the model to hand. Speaking of hands, this guy is supposed to have a powered one, giving him a not at all noteworthy strength 6. This one came from Acadian Command Sprue and needed a bit of D-ranking using the usual method. There was no way the Cadian upper arm was going to fly, so I did the old swapperoo with a House Cawdor arm that's actually appropriate for the torso. Speaking of which, the hand with the Morningstar also came from the Cawdor sprue, making this a fairly straightforward build from a part-matching perspective, whatever that means. Before I'd even started the build, I knew I wanted to use a specific Chaos Cultist head, and that meant constructing a bit of a neck from green stuff. I'll get back to the head choice in a minute, but first I constructed a backpack from a Deathcore of Krieg model with a trophy pole taken from the Age of Sigmar Slaves to Darkness chariot kit that's getting quite a lot of airtime in these builds. The pack was slapped on the back of the model and then eventually put in place on another base that's bigger than the game would normally allow. I'm quite the rebel. Now, I used that Horned Rat Cultist head because I wanted to make an Ogryn from a Skaven Rat Ogre that's been in my bits collection since the new edition of AOS launched, and I liked the thematic consistency. The build was incredibly straightforward. I followed the instructions of the kit, and then chopped off a hand to replace it with a close combat weapon from one of the other Rat Ogre models. Like his cultist minder, this guy needed a neck, and that meant a little more light green stuff work to blend it into the body. The head itself came from the skull sprue, giving this guy big horned demon rat vibes, which I think we can all agree are one of the types of vibe. And that's it for today's delve into the world of plastic surgery. I hope these builds have provided some inspiration for kitbashes of your own, or at least distracted you from the crushing brutality of existence for long enough to justify hitting the subscribe button.